with Scott Allen.
Hello, I am your host, Scott Allen, and this is Phronesis, Practical Wisdom for Leaders. If the topic is leadership, I'm in. I've spent more than 20 years in the field teaching, learning, writing, and questioning. When I'm not working on Phronesis, I travel, delivering keynotes, working with individuals and teams, and helping people from organizations across industries become better leaders. Want to learn more? Visit me at scottjallen.net. Phronesis offers a smart, fast-paced discussion about all things leadership. We explore relevant topics and incorporate practical tips to help you make a difference in how you lead and live. Listen Notes lists Phronesis in the top 3% of podcasts worldwide. Phronesis is the official podcast of the International Leadership Association. ILA brings together those who teach, study, and develop leadership, advancing leadership knowledge and practice for a better world. Learn more at ila-net.org. Finally, if you enjoy Phronesis, please subscribe to stay current on our weekly episodes. If you find an episode that resonates, please share it with your colleagues and friends. And if you want more content, subscribe to my newsletter, The Leader's Edge. The link is in the show notes. As always, thanks for listening. And now, here's today's show.
Okay, everybody, welcome to the Phronesis podcast. Thank you so much for checking in wherever you are in the world. Today, I have Dr. Flo Falayi, and he is a senior client partner advisory practice with Korn Ferry. He leads the leadership and executive development within the advisory practice, CEO and C-suite accelerator and succession team. He focuses on executive development, coaching, team effectiveness, and inclusive leadership programs to align with strategic priorities and enhance satisfaction, motivation, and retention. With 28 years of experience, Dr. Flo helps organizations execute strategy through effective leadership development and coaching. He has helped P&L responsibilities across HR, business technology, L&D, and training in global organizations. His full bio is in the show notes. Dr. Flo, thank you so much for joining me today. It's good to be with you. What's not in your bio that people need to know about you?
Oh my goodness, Scott. Thank you for a wonderful welcome. And glad we're finally able to make this happen.
Yes.
As you know, we've been trying to find the right time, the right date, and I'm glad we finally landed on that. I'm really excited to be here. And I think you did cover it all. To be honest, in terms of my bio, there's a lot behind some of the bullet points, and I could double click or share more as we go on. But I think one thing I'd like to just quickly call out is I'm a lifelong learner. And so you'll see that I've actually had the opportunity to touch different disciplines and be in different spaces, all in service of continue to add value to the development of leaders, the support of organizational objectives, and also for my personal growth as well. So thank you for having me.
Well, yes. I mean, a background in computer information systems, which I think is absolutely incredible. You have coaching certification through ICF, a member of the American Psychological Association. I love the interdisciplinary lens within which you are exploring this topic.
No, you've called out, that's one of, I would say, as I look back, I looked at how things are laid out. And I would say that's definitely one of my superpower in that I bring that multi-diverse, interconnected viewpoint to a good number of conversations. You know, in addition to that, I must add that I've also had the opportunity to have lived and worked in 3 different continents.
Okay.
And so often I'm also able to provide very distinct and also rich global perspective in some of the subjects that we deal with on a day-to-day basis. And not surprising, we're living definitely in a connected world, and it's like we're all playing in the same village. So I feel like that's my background has equipped me or is equipping me to do at least the work that I do in this space.
Well, what I'm really, really excited to hear about is just what are you seeing from your purview as you're working with leaders? What's kind of on your agenda? What's on your radar? What are some themes that are bubbling up for you?
Yeah, that's a great question. And coincidentally, we did a survey at Korn Ferry where we looked at the top 5 leadership trends that we believe will shape 2025.
Yes.
And I'll just quickly touch on the heading, and then I'll do a quick summary of maybe key areas that would challenge your listeners to lean into as they look into the new year. Without a doubt, I think technological advances and the AI revolution is definitely one, no doubt, right? So we're seeing leaders and organizations really pulling in the direction of elevating the proficiency level of not only the leaders, but also the employees and the organization as a whole in terms of the usage of it, the governance, the applicability to business, right? All of those key elements around technology. Secondly, we also realize the need for leaders to be able to, as it were, work with everyone and everything. In many cases, often you find leaders are able to leverage a few things like the 80-20 rule might be at play in many cases, but we're beginning to challenge leaders not only to look at just the 80-20, right? To really start to expand that, but in terms of what we call the go-to people, the people that they call,
Yep.
in terms of the resources. And how do you do that as a leader? It requires some degree of inclusive leadership ability and mindset. So that's definitely number 2. Number 3, it's really leaning heavy, especially for leaders in this season and this time, leaning heavy into how do we elevate the type of leaders that we're creating? How do we ensure we give space, time, development to those leaders as well? I mean, just realizing that we've got leaders today, managers, leaders, anyone who's a people leader, right? We've got leaders today who might be managing teams in different places, different time zones, different skill sets. And how we led pre-COVID is not how we will lead post-COVID. What worked in the past, right? And we see many organizations that we're working with and helping to elevate kind of like their pipeline and their throughput around leadership is that they still have done legacy, what we call that maybe 4 years. That was actually good at the time, but those models need to be tweaked to accommodate for what's top of mind today, right? So definitely a big opportunity. And I think that segues to the 4th one, which is around agility.
Yes.
How do we build that agile leadership capability where you can manage in the middle of the uncertainty and I would say, the chaos that exists without losing steam.
Yes.
And at the same time, you're also able to add significant value. And then the last piece is just for leaders to continue to hone in and focus significantly on trust. How do you build, nurture, and preserve trust amongst the team, amongst kind of like the contract between you as leader and your staff or your employee or your organization? So those are kind of like the top line issues, I would say. Happy to go deeper if you want any that you think will resonate the most with the audience on this topic.
Let's talk a little bit about trust. I think something I'm witnessing, and I don't know if you're seeing the same thing, but it seems to be that we are so focused in this kind of churn that the churn of the organization can just sweep us up. And if we are not really truly intentional, it was Stephen Covey, he had a time management matrix, and I think it was that quadrant 2 time, important but not urgent stuff.
Yeah.
If we aren't mindful, I hear leader after leader say, I'm just on teams after teams after teams call. No one's pausing, saying, how are you? It's go, 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 go. And it's hard to build a relationship and build trust if we are just in that churn and not systematically carving out some time to say, Flo, how are you? What do you got going on this weekend? And really pausing and being intentional about some of that work.
Yeah.
Because, building trust, navigating and leading in this new environment to work from home or work from anywhere or work 2 days a week or 3 days a week or Mondays and Fridays or whatever it is, it's different, but the need is still there. That human need is still there. Wouldn't you agree?
Absolutely. And you've captured quite a tension that exists today. One of the things I do say is that sometimes this type of tensions are not the type of thing that you solve and then move on to something else. You manage it, you solve it, you resolve it, it breaks, you stay with it, right? It's managing
Yes.
the trust responsibility that comes with leadership. I think to some extent, and if many leaders and organizations are being honest, there's significant low trust across the board. And I think it's a combination of sometimes I think the employees and team members want certainty, and leaders are unable to provide that because, again, to some extent, you just don't know.
Yeah.
Right. So how do you say definitively something is going to happen when you just don't control all the variables?
Yes.
So it is actually the reality of business, the reality of living today to say there's certain variables that are beyond the control. For example, case in point, geopolitical challenges, tensions, even across different parts of the region in the world, are things outside our control. But if you're a leader in the supply chain industry, for example, that is a distinct constraint that you have to monitor and at least focus on to ensure your business runs. I share that just to really amplify this desire people have around certainty. And one of the things that we call out and we definitely are intentional about, we helping leaders is lean less into trying to provide certainty and focus more around providing clarity.
Okay.
And what does that really mean? Is to say, when you're talking about dealing with clarity, is to say, hey, I have a fair sense of what the variables are or what the next series of steps are. And I can only communicate with certainty with regards to those items. Next month, I don't have those control, but I have a process and a system that allowed me to evaluate each uncertainty in a way to ensure I extrapolate the certainty to some extent or the clarity that is needed to get us to that certainty. So I think being able to change the language and being vulnerable and authentic enough to have that conversation. Again, talent is smart like money is smart, right? Money will flow in the right direction of the right investment. Talent will flow in the right direction as well, regards to value, respect, or what have you, and reward. And so when leaders really lean, in my opinion, into clarity, that trust that I think is intrinsically low will start to rise because they know that you will tell them what you know and to the extent that you are permitted or able to share.
Yep.
Again, the idea that leaders will divulge every information to their team members or their followers is ludicrous. It is not reality, but you can manage that. And I think that trust element is very key to driving productivity and driving engagement. And when you have remote, you have remote workers, you have hybrid workers, you have multi-generational folks in the workforce, you've got all this hubris. So what you can do is to lean into what you can control. You can control clarity. What can you control? You can control being vulnerable. You can control being transparent. You can control being human, right?
Yes.
And if you bring all those elements, I think it will actually have an impact on trust.
Well, I love that kind of framing of what can you control, and carving that out and prioritizing that is incredibly important. I mean, it's something I just keep bumping into, Flo, and I don't know if you're seeing this as well, but it can be easy at times for leaders to kind of externalize and, oh, Gen Zs, they're so difficult to work for, or work from home. It's just not how. And to your point, we need to be agile. And I loved your phrasing of talent will flow. I think we're being challenged to be better. I think a leader model of the 80s, 90s, early 2000s of do what I say, kind of bark the order, get people moving in the right direction, et cetera, that is broken. And our leaders of today have to be ambidextrous. And if there was a word for a third or a fourth dexterous, I don't know what that word is, but they need to be multi-dexterous.
That's
what
right.
We'll call it. We'll write an article called Multi-Dexterity in Leadership. Right.
Hey, sign me on. That's all.
But I mean, it's just so fascinating that it's a managing his polarities. I need to be vulnerable, but I need to be confident. I need to be all of these kind of balance these different competing commitments. And I'm not always going to win, but am I intentional about doing so that I can make the work move forward, build trust, and be agile, et cetera.
We're dealing with an interesting time right now.
Yeah.
And as you can imagine, a lot of people, out of fear, they will withdraw instead of leaning into whatever is causing the source of fear, right? It might be the uncertainty, it might be a lack of control, it might be the expectation from all the different distinct stakeholders around you in your business. And that's why when we talk about agile and agility and inclusive leadership, there's a component of courage.
Yeah.
We also call out. In this season, it's very easy to just withdraw into your shell and to just say, I'm going to do exactly what I've been doing. And then I'm going to burn hours. I'm going to do people disappointed. I will step up and do it. And at least we'll get the work done. The challenge that comes with that is that's not sustainable. It's not a sustainable model. You can't burn out trying to do this work. We have to delegate. We have to equip and build the next generation at the same time. And so I say all that to say, in this season, there's a need for courage. And the courage is one where you're able to note and create the environment where people can fail forward. Great book by Amy Edmondson around the right kind of...
The right kind of wrong, right?
The right kind of wrong. There we go. And just really creating this space in our respective organizations and teams and at home where we have and we give everyone permission to come into those spaces, knowing that their mistake is a learning opportunity, knowing that making an option or indicating an interest in something or trying something out or piloting something is actually commendable versus staying back and just doing only what you've tested, what is true, what has worked in the past, right? So I think there's that piece that would then allow some of this to remove some of this pressure. There is an inherent pressure in the system. And I think one of the things I'm hearing you say, and listen to a few of your episodes on your podcast with other leaders, is we've got to find a way to remove some of that pressure, right? There's a lot of pressure in the system. How do we take that out? We're seeing heightened instances of mental health challenges that people are having to then deal with on their own. We're having instances of people being overly stressed. We're having instances of people burning out. And I think it's all of these cumulative factors, the fear of failure, the inability to display courage, the worry about being canceled, right? All of those key social challenges as well, right, is making leaders then be skittish about taking the next few steps. So I think, again, I say all that to say, for leaders who are listening, you've got to be courageous. And it starts with you to say, I'm going to be courageous. I don't know it all. I'm going to make mistakes, and create that space that allows you as a leader to then get grace, as well as the other members of your team to also have grace given to them as well.
Yeah, because we need it. Back to Edmondson, if we as a leader are not creating that place of psychological safety for the team to share what they see, to fail, to make mistakes. I mean, again, it's fail small, fail fast, learn, iterate. The emphasis, uncertainty. If it's a VUCA context, nobody has the answer when it's some of these complex adaptive challenges. No one has the answer. There's no one we can call in the world to say, hey, I got this going on. We need to improve market share by 4%. What are the 6 steps? That's not a thing. So we are experimenting and we are learning. And what happens with experiments? Well, there's a level of failure. But if as a leader, we're not creating that psychologically safe space to have that conversation, to determine what we think is our best next guess, that leader's flying blind, right?
Totally. And if the culture is not one where that leader can be told, you're flying blind. I mean, that's the double challenge, right? It's like, one, the leader is flying blind. And then 2, there's no one that can say, hey, leader, you're flying blind. And this is kind of what we're seeing as a result of that. What a miss. Scott, you mentioned something there that I thought it's going to be helpful to maybe just also talk about. You talk about adaptive leadership.
Hmm.
And I think if there's a leadership style, in addition to, there's one other one that we call the enterprise leadership model at Korn Ferry, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But with regards to adaptive leadership, it is a language, a framework, a methodology that gives us insights to speak to things that we don't fully control. And often, I think, listening to some of the experts who actually penned and wrote about the theory, adaptive leadership applies to anything that involves, to some extent, to most extent, people. When you look at, for example, the intersection of people and technology, the people and AI, people and certainty, uncertainty, scaling, strategy. Like when you look at people with the intersection of anything, you almost will have an adaptive challenge. And here's the catch. With adaptive challenges, there are no perfect answers.
Yes.
And oftentimes we're used to this binary sense of around leadership. It's one or zero. It's one or the other. And adaptive leadership is beginning to challenge us to say, it's both.
Are we in the quantum world now? I don't know, Flo. Where are you taking me?
Not by design, Scott. Not by design.
But you're right. I mean, you're exactly right. Say more. I love this.
It's both. It's neither or, right? Oftentimes, I think we try to we pull one lever in hope that resolve this. And sometimes pulling one lever might lead to other downstream challenges. I think the point we're calling out is to say leaders need to be more aware, for example, of what it means when you're dealing with adaptive challenges. And then two, the tools, right? There's some, I recommend listeners to check it out, read some great pieces of article out of Harvard on this amazing theory. There are principles around calibrating heat, for example. There are things around dancing on the balcony, right? I mean, they're stepping up onto the balcony, not dancing. They're all these principles that allow us to at least assess, pause, because when you have so much haste and speed, your decision-making could be hampered, biased, influenced by recency, by urgency. But adaptive allows us to say, you know what, I might not be able to solve it, but let me find a way to manage it.
Yes.
Until I need to make a decision, a concrete decision. And I think that's a skill that we're seeing leaders also needing today.
Yes. And for listeners, listen to episode 100 with Ron Heifetz or episode 200 with Ron Heifetz, where he's kind of talking about some of this, because you're exactly right. And I think we want to solve, but especially with these adaptive challenges, it's about us chipping away, running experiments, seeing if we can move the needle.
Yeah.
And I think at times we can kind of get down because it hasn't been a 1 or a 0.
Yeah.
You're just chipping away, and we anchor on perfection or anchor on, well, this is the result we want. No, with these things, it's often slow.
It's fluid.
We're chipping away. We're running in experiments. We're failing some of the time. We're learning, hopefully, and moving ahead.
Absolutely. Absolutely. No, you talk about Professor Ron Heifetz. Yeah. He's the brilliant brain behind that work, and highly recommended all leaders. There was a piece, I want to make sure I don't forget, I mentioned it earlier, and I know your listeners will call us out if you don't do that. They'll send a note to Scott and they talk to Dr. Flo. What happened? That was looking forward to the second piece around that piece that he alluded to. And the piece I want to just call out is we have a model that we've called the enterprise leadership model, right? And really it's anchored on what enterprise leaders have to do, which is they have to be able to perform and transform the business at the same time. And when we talk about the perform premise, it's that you're running the business for today.
Yes.
Current state, you're making sure the lights are on, you make sure the widgets that you're creating, the service, the product, whatever it is that you're creating is done efficiently, appropriately, and what have you. But it's also the element of transformation and transforming the business for next year, 2025 and 2030 and 2050. And how do you ensure that the future and the current state are in tandem?
I love it.
And there insights around mindsets and principles that we've actually found through research that we definitely also challenge our leaders with, to say, there's a way to think about this. There's a way to assess your ability towards this model and then gaps that you can work on to get you to become an enterprise leader. I think it's surprising when we ran it, the initial survey, only about 13% of organizational leaders we found fall into this band of the enterprise leaders. So if there's anything, it's an opportunity for all to just think about how do I scale? How do I lead across the enterprise? Now, functional leaders tend to be siloed and very narrow in kind of their scope, but enterprise leaders are looking across the entire organization. And so I think there's also an opportunity there as a way to manage the true state of things in your organization today.
But I love that phrasing. I think we just got the title of the episode, Perform and Transform. I mean, because that's, again, one of those tensions, one of those polarities that leaders are navigating is ensuring that we are whole now and that we are, I almost think of like an amoeba, you're right? You're kind of morphing into what we're going to be.
Yeah.
And again, that's probably somewhat of a slow, methodical process, but is it on our radar? And am I leading that process so that we're relevant, viable, and in the game 3 years, 4 years down the road, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I concur. I love the imagery. In fact, in the model, it's two circles that's connected. So it speaks to this continuous loop. It's like a racetrack that is looping. You're constantly dealing with perform, transform, perform, transform. Sometimes you're 60% in the perform because you've got key deliverables, but at the same time, there's a 40%, right? So you're never stopping one for the other. They're like, it's in constant motion. It might be 10, 90, 90, 10, whatever the ratio is. And I think it helps encapsulate what leaders face.
Yeah.
Because it's no longer stationary. It's no longer fixed. It's fluid. So again, I concur. I love the amoeba as
moving forward. Yes.
Right.
Yeah, that kind of infinity loop, the Mobius strip, right? I mean, it's great. Well, okay. As we begin to wind down, anything else on your radar that you want listeners to have on theirs that you're seeing from your purview?
Yeah, I think people always isolate generations. Say, oh, Gen this or Gen that, right? We're challenging. I remember one of my friends, a professor in business school, who was talking about generational categorization. It's an interesting exercise from just to help make sense of people. There's a fundamental need that people have in general. So we challenge leaders to be mindful of that. Now, on the flip side, when we did the survey, because again, you can band the generation by, the year, there are a couple of things that came up in our recent research. 70% of Gen Z are not interested in leadership.
Wow.
That's a high number of our next generation of leaders. And the question that we have to ask is, why is that the case? Why are they saying they don't care for it? I have my boys, two of them are in college, and then my youngest is a junior in high school. They're Gen Z. And one of the things that as I engage them and ask them why, they're looking at the rewards associated with some of those responsibilities. One, they're looking at the lack of clarity. Remember, we started with clarity at the onset of the program that is associated with some of the leadership styles that some leaders have. They're looking at the inadequacy of feedback. They, particularly as a generation, want constant, immediate feedback. They want to know how they're doing, where's the gap, where is the growth opportunity, almost on a constant, I would say, weekly, bi-weekly basis. I look at when I joined the workforce. If I got feedback once a quarter, that's great. I knew what I was asked to do and I did it. In many cases, I looked at senior colleagues to learn from them and I kept growing and finding my own way. But it's no longer the way that they want to be led, right? And they're asking us, again, I'm just really calling this out for leaders who are taking the time to listen to the podcast, which is just commendable and great, is that pressure test your assumptions.
Yeah.
Ask, validate what you think you know as a leader, and have this constant learning mindset where as you interact with your team members, you're asking, how can I support you?
Yep.
How can I equip you? And how can I develop you? And you're constantly making sure that you ensure that you're meeting each individual at kind of their level. It's hard work, no doubt, Scott. We're talking about really hard work, but it's also great work in that if you do it right, when you do it right, the rewards are generational. So I just want to encourage the leaders who are listening to make that commitment, but to study, to research, to learn, to get training, get support, as well as just validating and calibrating some of those things that you're hearing and finding.
Yeah. If you have an authentic relationship with someone, some things follow, trust, you can be vulnerable. I mean, so much of what we have kind of discussed today can somewhat they're going to have psychological safety to say what they think. That doesn't mean that you're always going to have to agree with what they say or act on what they say, but they know and believe in their heart that you care, that you want to know, that you want their perspectives on the table, in the room and in the space. And gosh, I love the conversation. I always wind down these conversations by asking, what's caught your attention recently? What have you been reading or listening to? Is there something, it could be what you've been streaming. It may have nothing to do with what we've just discussed. Maybe you're watching The Old Man, right? Who knows? But
no, that's
something that's caught your attention, sir.
That's a great question. The one that's actually been taking most of my attention recently is this book called Calling Bullshit. I don't know if you heard of it.
No.
Fascinating because of its focus on equipping the readers to understand how to synthesize truth from disinformation.
Oh, wow.
And also the challenge that truth has, and folks who are leaning to facts and truth have in a world of rapid disinformation and I would say falsehoods, right? And business and life, it could be in any space. And it's a recommended read because it also provides very strong practical insight for what many people might be facing. I love that he also went beyond just even the cultural landscape. He went into actually data. We're in the age of big data. And like we know, we can make data say anything that we want it to say. And it provided just some good insight around correlation, causation, and being able to just really follow the core insight and essence around data. So great read, recommended read. And I've been using Audible for a lot of my learning these days. There's another book I'll just mention quickly. It is so good and I love it. It is called The Trusted Advisor, right? In my work, but as a leadership coach and also a leadership advisor and consulting, being able to just really build, again, that trust and really highlight the value that we propose and bring to the table in our work. I think those two books would be great add for leaders.
Great. Okay. So Calling Bullshit and The Trusted Advisor. I will put those in the show notes.
Awesome.
Dr. Flo, thank you, sir. We'll do it again.
We would definitely will. Scott, thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to having you on my podcast as well. So stay tuned. It will happen very soon.
Oh, that's awesome. Okay. Be well. Thank you, sir. I appreciate it.
So much fun to meet a new friend who is looking at this puzzle from a similar yet unique vantage point in his work with Korn Ferry. Flo, just very, very much appreciate you bringing that perspective to the table for us to better understand this phenomena called leadership and what we need to do to better prepare people to serve in these really complex roles. Love it. Absolutely love it. For me, the practical wisdom is, are you looking at this puzzle from a number of different perspectives? And of course, Flo brings a wonderful perspective to the table. We talked a little bit about those multiple perspectives in the beginning of the conversation. Take care, everyone. As always, thank you so much for checking in. Be well. Bye-bye. You have just finished another episode of Practical Wisdom for Leaders with Scott Allen. To contact me, visit scottjallen.net or send me a note at scott@scottjallen.net. I'm also on LinkedIn, so let's connect. If you have feedback, I'd love to hear it. And as always, thank you so much for listening. And now here's my daughter, Emily, with the outro.
You've been listening to Phronesis, Practical Wisdom with Scott Allen.